Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are back with day number 2 of this weekend getaway 5-round Iowa State Open Chess Championship. Now, yesterday I played 3 classical games. As you guys no doubt could tell in my second recap, I was completely exhausted after the third and final game. Luckily today, there are only 2 games, the final 2 rounds of the event. Unfortunately, I'm playing against the top 2 seeds besides myself. So we're going to pick it up in the 4th round. I'm playing against a young player, 14-year-old kid by the name of Rao Anjaneya Sripathi. He has a USCF rating of approximately 2250, but his FIDE is a little bit lower at 2147. Nonetheless, he had a perfect score going into this round of 3 out of 3, so he is not someone who should be taken lightly. So let's jump right into the game. Now, I have the black pieces. Obviously, I don't want to draw or take any big risks, so I decided to play the move c5. Actually, I shouldn't have said risk. What I meant to say is I want to be aggressive. I really don't want to give up a draw. So I started out by playing the classic Siciliano opening, considered to be one of the most aggressive tries. We get knight f3, knight c6, and now we get the move bishop b5. Now, in this position, I played the move knight to f6 here, and this is a system that I have not played for the better part of 20 years. Now, I played this system in the early 2000s. I had some famous games against players like Tiviakov, for example, where I played the setup, but it is simply something I have not looked at recently. Nonetheless, when you're playing lower-rated players, every possible opening idea is in play. So we get bishop takes knight. I take back with the d pawn. Already here I had a decision. I did consider taking with the b pawn here and trying to play for the structure with d6, but ultimately I thought that d takes was a little bit more solid, and as my opponent was moving instantly, I didn't want to play something dubious and walk into some preparation. So I take with a d pawn. We get d3, I play g6, we get bishop e3, and now I play the move b6, protecting the pawn. We get h3, bishop to g7, and now we get this move knight to c3. Here I play knight d7, and now you're probably wondering, what am I doing by moving the knight? Why am I not just castling my king out of the center? When you look at this position, it's very important to understand the fundamentals. And in this position, I have these double pawns here, and the big issue for me is that I can't really attack this white center. For example, if I ever go move like c4, white can just take the pawn, so it's really hard to attack this white center, and so I need to look for some other ideas. Now, the idea that I come up with is very thematic. It does occur in a lot of these Ross-Lemos systems, where I play this move knight to d7, queen d2, and now I play the move h6. Now, this move is very important because if I play a move like e5 here, white can go bishop to h6, trying to trade off this fianchetto bishop on g7, and as you guys can tell from the evaluation bar, white is much better. So I play h6 to stop bishop h6, trying to keep this b alive, and now my opponent decides to castle his king out of the center. Now, this move came as a huge shock to me because in all my years of actually playing chess and studying different variations within the Ross-Lemos, I can't recall ever seeing a single line where white castles queenside, at least not this early. There are some lines later where white maybe will have moved a knight, pushed a pawn, and then castled kingside, but castling kings or queenside, I should say, from the get-go is something that I've never seen before. So now in my mind, I've started to think to myself, what is my opponent going for? What is going on? I've never seen this before. He's clearly creating this on the spot. He must have some plan in mind. Now, I actually worked it out, and I sort of correctly guessed what his intention was, because here I played the move queen to c7. Now, I thought about playing the best move in the position, pawn to e5 here. The idea, by the way, after e5 is that black wants to play knight to f8, something like knight to e6 here, and now you grip the center with this knight and these pawns, and black is doing very well. But I thought to myself, my opponent must have a plan, because if he knew what he was doing here in this position, he probably would have just castled kingside like everybody normally does. So when he castled, I thought to myself, okay, if I play e5, it's probably too easy for my opponent to find this move knight to h2, and then the move f4, and then something like takes knight e6, and knight to f3 back. White has a very compact center here. The position is probably still about balance, but I didn't want my opponent to come up with easy moves. So as I said, I was thinking about what my opponent's plan was, and when I played the move queen c7, I actually thought that my opponent's idea was to play to open up the center with this move d4. Now, this move is a terrible practical decision. It's not a move that loses or anything along those lines, but one thing that I would caution for all the players who are watching this video, especially if you're an intermediate player, is try to understand the themes. Now, let's just go back to the very start of the game here with bishop takes and pawn takes. Now, at the higher levels in chess, generally the bishop pair is considered to be a big advantage. And in this position, the big compromise that I've had to accept here is that even though I get the bishop pair, white has doubled these pawns. So when your opponent gets a bishop pair, generally you want to have something in return. Now, this is a higher level concept. This is probably not applicable to lower levels. But when you get the bishop pair, generally this is considered to be very advantageous at the higher levels. So you need to prove that there's something in return for it. And as I just mentioned, here I have the double pawns on c5 and c6. So as we get back to the game, when I play the move queen c7 and my opponent goes d4, now after I trade, I no longer have these double pawns and I effectively have the bishop pair or the 2Bs gratis. So I go e5, bishop to e3, and now I play the move bishop a6. And even though white is not necessarily much worse here, with the bishop pair in play and the fact that I can finish my development on the next turn, black is just better. Also, D's knights are very inactive here. The squares are covered by the pawns. This pawn covers this one. D's knights are not going anywhere in the middle of the board. So here we get king b1. I castle, and now we get the move g4, and I play the move knight c5. We get queen c1, and I put my knight on this e6 square, spying both f4 and d4. Now at this point, this has been a dream opening for me. Everything is looking up. So we get rook takes rook. I take with the queen, and now we get this move h4. Now at this point, I actually spent a lot of time here. I think I spent about 15 minutes before playing my next move. And the reason is that one of the drawbacks playing lower rated players is a lot of the thoughts that were going through my mind are, how do I trick him? Where is he most likely to make a mistake? Which move is going to work? Now, that is why I spent a lot of time here. If I were playing a 2700 plus gem, I almost certainly would just blitz out a move like knight to d4. But because I was playing someone lower rated, I had to think about this in terms of what I want. Now, I could have played h5 and gotten this fixed pawn structure on the king side. This was one thought. I also thought maybe I could play knight d4 here, but I felt that after rook to d1, white's moves again are going to be very easy. So I was really trying hard to figure out what to do, and ultimately I played queen to f6, we get rook h3, and now I pop the knight on d4. Here we get to move pawn to g5, I go queen to e6, and now we get to move rook g3. Now again, the moment of truth for me, what do I do here? Do I take the pawn on g5 or do I push the pawn? Now these are very deep concepts, and this sort of shows the big problem with playing lower rated players, because these thoughts that are going through my mind are more about how do I confuse them? Where do I have the best winning chance? Are my best winning chances with an open h file? Are my best winning chances closing the king side, playing rook d8, and 20 moves from now playing f6 to attack on the king side? I'm not 100% sure, so it's more about the concepts and trying to figure it out versus doing pure calculations, and I don't think that is actually a good thing to be doing. So we get rook g3. Ultimately, I decide that with an open file potentially an open file on the h file, this should give me a better chance to win versus playing h5, which by the way is the best move in reality, because now we end up with the clogged toilet. The king side is completely blocked up here. I can probably play rook to d8 and maybe f6 somewhere, but I don't see anything concrete, and that's why I decided to take on g5. Now, knight takes g5 was played here, and this move came as a big surprise to me. I thought that h takes g5 was simply a better move. I thought that after rook to h3 here, I should be a little bit better, but after takes and knight d2, white is still defending in this position, and maybe I can go bishop f8 and start to activate the b's, but the game has a long way to go till its conclusion. Instead, we get knight takes g5 here, and now in this position, I play the move queen to e7. Now, the reason knight takes g5 is a mistake is because it creates this permanent weakness on the h file while my pawn structure is completely intact. So we get queen h1. Now I go king to b8. At this point, I play king b8 here because even though the bishop on a6 looks really pretty, it's spying a completely empty diagonal, and the bishop's not doing a whole lot. So I go king to b8 with the intention of rerouting the bishop potentially to c8 and then e6 as well. We got a3, bishop c8, and now my opponent plays the move f4. Now this move I think is a big mistake here, but it's very tough to play from the white side, and one thing that I think lower rated players struggle a lot with is there's some positions where you simply need to sit on your hands and not do anything at all. Now the best move here is to play something like rook g1 here, and after king b7, black is still much better, but it's not really clear what black's plan is going to be either after you simply wait with a move like rook g3, because if I ever go f6 after knight to f3, now the pawn on g6 can become a return weakness alongside this pawn on h4. So as I said, many lower rated players, they struggle a lot with not doing anything. It's very hard just sitting on a position, not when you don't have a plan. Because in the game of chess, you want to play logical moves. You need to have a plan. That's what we do. You strategize. You come up with the best ideas, right? Well, sometimes there are no ideas and you just have to play a boring move and pretend that nothing is happening. But my opponent can't do that. We get f4, now I trade, I go king b7, and at this point now, not only is there a weakness on h4, but now the long diagonal for my dark square b is opening up here, and at this point I felt very confident that I was going to win this game. So we get rook to d3. Now I play the move knight to e6, we get knight takes knight, and I take back with the bishop. Now the big difference here versus position just a couple of moves ago is look at the two Bs. The Bs are completely alive here on the diagonals, and white is just much worse. Whereas if we go back right here, after a move like rook g1, the bishop is walled in by the pawn and the knight. There is no scope on this diagonal for the fianchettoed bishop. So we get this position, takes, and now we get the move queen d1. Now this move was a panic move by my opponent. Bishop to g3 is simply a better move here, protecting the pawn on h4, and after bishop c4, and let's say rook to f3 here, black can probably play a move like g5, or maybe even rook to d8, and with the double op combo on the diagonals, the rook on the open lane, this is going to be a miserable position to defend. Now, for my opponent, when he plays queen d1, this is based on a very tricky idea here that I think he calculated from a tactical standpoint, and he thought it worked. Unfortunately, it doesn't. So I take the pawn, and now my opponent springs the move rook to d7, sacking the rook, hoping that I will take the rook on d7. Now, if I were to take the rook after takes and king a6 here, white can simply take the pawn on c6, and if I take the knight on c3, there's simply a repetition here. White will white takes, white goes queen d3, my mistake, wrong repetition. Queen d3, queen d7, not queen to a4, and the game will end peacefully. So I can't do that. Additionally, if I were to take what looks like a free bishop here, after knight to d5, queen f1, and king a2, white is actually checkmating this black king on the edge of the board. The king is getting stuck, and white will win. But the great thing here is that because I had so much time, I had calculated this line, and I realized that king to a8 simply is a safe move. I ignore the rook here, and now white basically is completely lost because the rook is on pre, the bishop is under attack, I can take this knight. White simply has all these loose pieces on the board, and there's no way to keep it going. So we get the move knight to e2, I take the rook, and now I play the move queen to f6 here, lining up the double A battery and the checkmate towards the pawn on b2. Here we get to move knight to d4, and now I play the move queen takes f4, and my opponent resigns the game. Now I apologize if the sound might be a little bit off. The AC just turned on in my room. I had it off, but it apparently turned on for some unknown reason, so what to do? So I apologize if that's going to affect the noise a little bit, but it is what it is. Anyway, after knight d4, queen takes f4, my opponent resigns here because after takes and king b8, there's simply no checks on the dark squares here, so I'm simply up a clear rook in this position, and I will win the game. So I get a very nice one with a black piece. I move to a perfect score of 4 out of 4, and now I'm feeling really good because in the final round, I know that I'm going to have the white pieces. But I get an even tougher pairing in the final round when I'm playing with the white pieces against a very talented 12-year-old Russian junior, Artemy Khanbatayev. Now, this player, Khanbatayev, is a player who came into the tournament with a half-point bye, but he won all 3 of his games to get to a score, he won 3 of his games to get to a score of 3.5 out of 4 after the first round bye. Very, very talented junior player, 12 years old, so I knew this was going to be a fight. Now, luckily, I have the white pieces, so I open with the move c4, as saying the classic English. We get knight to f6, play knight c3, e6, and now I play the move pawn to e4. Now, this is what is known as the McKennett's attack here. Usually, black will play the move pawn to d5, and after e5, d4, this leads to a very, very complicated middle game with chances for both sides. Now, remember, I'm playing a young kid, so I don't know exactly what he's going to do, but I had a general idea. I only had about 10 minutes before the game to prepare, and this is the best I could come up with. But to my surprise, Artemy here plays the move pawn to c5, and this is actually a system that was played against me by none other than Robert Hess about 20 years ago in a Foxwood tournament. I actually lost that game from this position after playing the move e5, knight to g8, and then this move pawn to d4. Now, with computers and 20 years later, all these lines are considered acceptable for black, and since I'm playing such a young kid who's blitzing out moves, I decide, you know what, I need to do something different. So I go knight to f3 here. Now we get knight to c6, d4, takes, bishop b4, takes, and bishop to d3. Now this is a system that I played many, many moons ago against Wesley So. It also featured in a game recently between Fabiano Caruana and Wesley So himself in the Sinkfield Cup about 2 weeks ago. But I thought because my opponent is moving so quickly, I want to take him out of his prep and try to just play a game of chess. So here we get the move e5. I castle, we get castles, and now I play the move bishop to e3. f3. Now in this position there are many moves. Bishop g5 is a move, h3 is a move. Ultimately I chose bishop e3 because one of the ideas that I thought someone could come up with very easily is an idea like bishop to c5 and bishop d4, putting this bishop on a really nice diagonal. So I decided to play the move bishop to e3, stopping this idea. So now we get the move rook to e8. Here I play rook c1, and this is what I would like to refer to as the dark arts. Now, specifically what I mean by dark arts here is that chess is a game, especially playing at these levels, where I have to figure out what my opponents are trying to think, because I know they're not looking at it the same way I am. For example, I knew my opponent was out of theory, whereas Sarah playing Pragnananta, he would still be well within his theory base in this position, so there wouldn't be any tricking him at all. But what I realized here is a couple things. In this position, black could take the knight on c3 and play e5, for example. So first option, now we get this position. Black again could take on c3 and castle. 2 times now, my opponent has not taken the knight on c3. So back to the game, right here after bishop e3, we get a third time, 3 times. My opponent has not taken this knight on c3. So now I naturally play the move rook to c1, and because my opponent has not captured for 3 different turns on c3, I now know he's definitely not going to capture, because if you capture now, I take back with the rook, and again, I'm left with the 2 b's. Whereas back here, at least, after bishop e3, in this position, white has these crummy double pawns on top of each other, so there is some merit to giving up the bishop pair. But when I go rook c1, I knew that he would not take, and sure enough, he plays move queen to e7, and this move is simply a very, very serious inaccuracy. So now I go a3, we get bishop to c5 here, I trade, knight a4, queen e7, and now after this move pawn to c5, black's pawn structure is ruined in the center of the board. What black needed to do, for example, was to play something like takes and play d5, opening up the center right away, or something along the lines of playing d6 here to open up the diagonal for the bishop before I can get this move c5 in, because now black's center pawns are completely reasonable. Instead, back to the game, we get queen to e7, we get this position, and after c5, black has a horrible bishop here, and black is going to have to push this pawn forward at some point, and now black is left with these very ugly split pawns on the queen side. It's not like this is necessarily losing, but it's going to be very easy for me to gang up on this pawn on c6. So I play rook c3. We get bishop g4, and now I go queen to e3. And in retrospect, I was very unhappy with this decision to play queen e3. I thought I should have played queen c2 from a practical standpoint, so I'm getting set to line up the legendary triple stack or Alekine's gun on the c-file like I did earlier in the tournament. Whereas when I go queen to e3 and queen to d4 is played here, this is very concrete. After takes, we're in an endgame where black has these 2 weaknesses, but if I'm not precise here, this game could very easily end in a draw. So I go knight c5, knight d7, and now I play the move knight a6. Now, when I was calculating queen e3 for like the 1 minute before I played it, or maybe 2 minutes before I played this move, I actually thought that after knight to a6, I was completely winning here. I saw rook to c8, for example, and I thought after b4 followed by rook to c1, I was doing very, very well. But then my young opponent springs knight b6, and immediately I'm like, what am I doing? Because here, if I play a move like b4, there's suddenly knight to a4, and the rook and the bishop are under attack. If I move the rook, there's bishop e6, and just like that, it is the classic uh-oh spaghetti-o moment. I'm going to lose a lot of material. So I go back, we get knight d7, and now I play knight b3, the rook goes back, and here I play the move f3. Now this move is a very serious error by me. What I should have played was the move knight to a5 right away, attacking the pawn, and the main reason for this is after c5, I can now play this move bishop to c4 here, and if black goes bishop e6, after takes, and rook d1, my rooks are perfectly placed on both the d and the c files. Whereas in the game, when I play the move f3 and now knight a5, had my opponent played c5 here, if I go bishop c4 now, black can simply take, and after knight takes, rook d4, black is controlling this open file with this rook. I don't gain access to the d file. Instead, we get the move knight b6, and after this move was played, I was really, really happy because as soon as knight b6 was on the board and I was able to play bishop c2, this pawn is going to get glued on the c6 square, and from a positional standpoint, I thought I had really, really good chances to win. On top of that, my opponent is down to 15 minutes on the clock, so it's going to be miserable trying to defend this position. So we got the move rook to c8 here. Now I play b4, stopping the pawn from going forward, and at this point with the pawn simply glued and permanently attacked here, black is just going to suffer. We get king f8, I go rook c1, king e7, and now I play the move king to f1. Now I'd love to put the bishop on d3 here, but I always have to be aware of this very tricky move, knight to a4, attacking the rook and the bishop. So I go king f1. We got bishop d7, king to e2, bishop e8, and now I play the move king e3. Now here I already could go bishop d3, because after knight a4, I can move the rook, and the king guards the bishop, but I decided to play king e3, just trying to improve the position to the maximum. We get rook c7, and now I go bishop d3, and with the double stack, the knight, and the bishop coming towards this fixed pawn on c6, this position is completely hopeless. We get f5 here. Now I go rook to c5. I do not take the juicer on f5, because after knight d5, the knight forks the king and the rook. I move the king, I lose the rook, and maybe I'm still in the game, but I'm definitely not winning. So I go rook to c5 here, attacking the pawn on e5. We get f4, king e2, king f6, and now I play the move bishop b5 with the two rooks on the c file, the bishop and the knight here. The double stack and the other pieces are very much in harmony here. I'm going to win the pawn on c6, and also because black has pushed this f-pawn too far up the board, now the pawn on e5 is a permanent weakness, where if black were to say have the pawn on f6, this probably is still winning, but at least this pawn on e5 is protected, versus the game where now this pawn on e5 is a permanent weakness, as the king really isn't going to be a very good defender. So we got king e6. I play bishop takes c6, and now my opponent resigns because with only 45 seconds on the clock, down a pawn and these massive weaknesses on a6, a7, and e5, it's all but hopeless. A sample line would be bishop takes bishop, knight takes here, now the pawn on e5 is under attack. We try to guard with knight d7, I have knight d8, checking the king and creating the classic fossil. I take the tower, I take the pawn, I have a double stack on the 7th. This is just GG, why not? Instantly. So, if black were to play something like takes, and I don't know, king f6 for example, I can just take this pawn for free. If black takes, I take with the pawn. It's all but hopeless here. Black is going to lose more pawns, and there's really no counterplay either. My king covers the second rank. Black can't infiltrate, and it's just over. So, after bishop takes c6, I get a very important win in the 5th and final round of this Iowa State Open Championship. Overall, the games today were tough. I ultimately was able to come out on top, but as I said before, even though people might look at this and think it's really easy and I'm farming or something along those lines, these games are very tough, and I actually don't like being in the situation where you're playing someone much lower rated and you're sort of waiting for a blunder, and the more moves that go by and there is no blunder, you become more and more frustrated. It is not something that I enjoy. So even if people think, oh, you're winning all these games, you're winning rating points, it's so easy, I actually don't enjoy the actual games against lower rated themselves, because I really have to shift the mindset, and it's more about hoping and waiting for the opponent to make a mistake. And the more they don't, the more afraid you become that maybe they're underrated and they will actually make a draw. But it all works out. I get 5 more games under my belt here in this Iowa State Open Championship. I'm now 11 out of 11. We've completed now 11 more games on my path to the candidates between Louisiana and here. That was 6 and 5. 18 plus 11 equals 29. So we've got 29 games down. There are 11 more games that I need to play between now and December 31st of this 2025 calendar year. If I don't play 40 games, I won't qualify for the candidates. But with 3 months to go, I should get the games. The rating spot should also be all but guaranteed since it's an average rating, and I have gained quite a few points in these 2 tournaments. At any rate, I want to give a big shout out to all the great fans who showed up here in Iowa to watch the tournament, all the fans who showed up in Louisiana, all the great support from you guys, the fans watching at home as well. It's really nice to play in front of my fellow Americans. You know, this is my home country. I'm very thankful for all the opportunities that I've had over the years in chess, and really, it is an opportunity to give back. For example, this final opponent I played, this 12-year-old kid, he's someone who's working with a very strong grandmaster and a former U.S. champion. I'm sure he and his coach will go over this game. He'll learn from it. I have no doubt he'll probably go on to become at least an international master down the road, and it's an experience that I think he will cherish for a very long time. So all in all, it was a great event. It was fun to play in Louisiana, fun to play here in Iowa, fun sort of to give back a little bit to the community that has given so much to me. And that's going to do it for my recap today. So, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and we'll be back with some more great content. We have Title Tuesday in a couple of days, more tournaments, hopefully in the near future. One last note I will add is that I have not booked tickets. I have not planned my last 2 tournaments to get to the 40 games yet, so you guys will have to wait and see. There is no set schedule for what I'm doing. So that'll do it. I'll be here in Iowa, going to go collect my prize money, which I will donate down the road, and I'll see you guys all very soon. So have a great rest of your weekend, and have a good one. See you guys. Bye.